Hi all, welcome back to session 3 of Rewiring Supply Chains Digital Transformation Odyssey. This session I would term as Beyond Transactions. The reason being, you'll just come to know, for years GCCs and GBS centers in India have been seen as transactional back offices. Yeah, it sounds familiar? Counting as efficient, reliable, but limited in influence. And this episode we challenge that old story and replace it with a new one, where GCCs become strategic digital hubs that shape global supply chain decisions. Yeah. Veena talks about how digitalization inside GCC rises above, far above tickets and transactions. We explore VR based learning, digital twins, analytics capability building, and how teams in India now manage end to end processes like S2C, S2P, P2P, and even parts of R2, or maybe the entire R2R cycle as well. But the real heartbeat of this session is the human story. We talk about leadership, mindset shifts, and the pivotal role of middle managers who either accelerate change or block it. We dive into talent, empowering young professionals, career readiness, curiosity, and responsibility. Leaders have to cultivate capability and not just capacity. There is also an honest and meaningful conversation about women empowerment. As I said earlier, this topic is very close to Veena's heart. And workplace flexibility, returnship programs, mentorship, inclusions, and building policy environment where everyone can grow. This episode is more than digital. It is about human transformation, how people, culture, and purpose come together to turn GCCs into engines of innovation. And there's much more than GCs and GBS we are talking about in this particular episode. So do watch the entire episode and keep watching the entire podcast series Rewiring Supply Chain Digital Transformation Odyssey and of course the ZYNC podcast. Keep tuned for session 4. Thank you.
Hi, Veena. Good morning, and welcome back to third session of our ZYNC podcast, Digitalization and Supply Chain.
Good morning, Sandeep.
I'm doing very well, Veena. Thank you, and thanks a lot for giving this much time for these sessions.
No, it's my pleasure to share the experience and yeah, and also it's also a good conversation, right? So it's also like
Yeah,
we can learn from each other. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I'm definitely gaining a lot for that matter. So, Veena, in the previous couple of sessions, we have discussed a lot about digitalization, program management, the risk part, and all of the topic, visualization and other aspects. So, to start with, in today's discussion, I want to touch upon the GCC part. So, in India, we have multiple GCCs. It become the capital for the GCCs, global captive centers, or the global business services of the different multinational corporations around the world, and predominantly they have been into IT development, also from the banking sector. But now GCC or GBS are coming up with the supply chain support as well, and these support or the activities to start with remain tactical, but then the organization, specifically GCCs, have the ambition or the vision or mandate to create value addition for the organization as they scale up or become mature in their journey. So now, looking from their digitalization journey, what kind of support they would need when they are setting up their shop in a GCC or GBS kind of environment, and then scaling it up and become mature, giving some value addition to supply chain organization as well as the whole business as such. So, what in your view this journey look like, and how they should take it from the digitalization perspective specifically?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. In fact, this is one of the topic that we have been. I think a couple of weeks before I was in Bangalore, and
Okay.
we do have a big GCC there in
Mhm.
multiple functions, including supply chain. So
Okay.
there's always this conversation. I was at a dinner table. We have been talking about in industry, right? In India, as you said,
Yeah.
it's actually think about it as a supply chain as a starting point, and I think even from our previous experience and in the previous companies, it's transactional oriented in the past, and I think everybody now talking about how can they do a value addition, because I think with the technology evolution, this is mandatory for us to start rethinking about how GCC can add value rather than just doing transaction, right? Because technically, typical transactions can be automated, but as supply chain is all about exceptions. So the you know if you want to be surviving in this supply chain GCC, you really have to know I mean, you really need to understand the processes, and you really need to start positioning yourself as a value addition. Now, I think as part of the topic, we have been talking about, okay, so we get a good human potential, like human capital in India, right? And they're smart. I mean, I got a chance to interact with our grad hires for this year. Amazing talent, right? I mean, I was like, okay, so I mean, during those years of our years, I mean, we cannot even compare. These guys are
Yeah.
like well matured, well exposed. They know what they are talking, right? I mean, they're confident and they are. So it's really like, how do we give them industry experience, right? How
Yeah.
do we use the technology to give that industry experience? Even I mean, as a supply chain, obviously, there are scenes which are changing in India today where you do have full end-to-end manufacturing than 10 years before,
Yes.
15
Yeah.
years before, trying to find an SMT kind of a process within an India where, from scratch to that output, we had only a couple of players who was doing
Yeah.
it, right? But today it is increasing, but then is it in every city? Will you have
Mm.
opportunity to go and visit? Maybe not. But we were thinking like, okay, so even in our case, we don't have internal factories in India,
Mhm.
obviously. But how do we give them that experience, right? I mean, how do we use our technology to give
Mm.
that experience? So
Mm.
we are working on something like, how do we give them a virtual experience? I mean, today there is a
Okay.
lot of VRs and
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, how do we give them a factory walk without being physically there, right? And how do there are procurement team who's sitting there and buying parts and they're talking to the suppliers, but they
Mm.
never seen the parts, right?
Yeah.
And I know, like, I mean, we could always have a touch and feel. You ship some of the parts to them and set it up and they see it and whatnot. But again, with the technology, I don't think physically that need to be there either. So we are working on something like how do we give them a visual view of the parts that they are working with or chasing, right? And what will be the impact if that part is not available within the product that is they are supporting, right? So, I mean, how do we use the technology to give them sort of a virtual experience so they really understand the factory or the floor real, right? The other thing that we wanted to do also is get them be part of any of the ops reviews that you have. So
Yeah.
I mean, your Gamba work or like
Yeah.
you have your, like in a manufacturing lines, you have mornings and evenings, you have daily meets and those kind of
Yeah.
a thing. How do we get them involved? And I think with the technology now, it should be doable, much better than what it used to be during our early days. So that's basically like what we are looking at, right? And once they know what it is happening, I'm pretty sure these generation is pretty smart and grasping the stuff and figuring
Yes.
it out. The other thing that we were also thinking about is pair them with your experienced people, right? And then
Yeah.
really see how they go about making decisions on exceptions. Because
Mm.
when you talk about supply chain value add, whether it's planning, whether it's buying, and all of that, it's really what decision that you make when there is an exception, right?
Exception. Yeah.
Because otherwise, if it is system, it just becomes a transaction at that point,
Yeah.
right? So, and then how do we trigger like a proactive thinking? So not just from do what your customers are asking you to do, rather can you provide certain insights for them because they are busy with the day-to-day firefighting.
Yeah.
They may not be having a time to step back and really rethink about how we leverage all of this and then make leap forward in their process. But then you have access to all the data, right?
Yeah.
Being part of GCC. So how can we give a value added analysis, which we are very good at, and start driving those conversations? I mean, in fact, now we set up like what we call it as a think tank and some of these and start driving some of these conversations, right? So that they feel they are part of the overall process, right? A good example that I can say last year, I believe we were trying to do something on a smart rework, right?
Okay.
Where my team in Bangalore
Mm.
was trying to build a solution and it's a Gen AI solution, right? Solution wise, it looks good, right? But then it expects every operator to give you a feedback
Mhm.
and learn from, what they did yesterday. And I was like, okay, so do you guys know what's happening in the floor, right? I mean,
Mhm.
does your operators are capable of doing that, right?
Yeah.
Or like in majority of the company, your line operators are contractors. So who is there today may not be there tomorrow, right? So defining a solution with an expectation, high expectation of what operators can do, it's not a right thing. So we basically, we were trying to say that, but then people felt that we are like shutting their innovation off and, their thought process and all of that. So we basically said that, okay, fine, let's do this. So we kind of set up like, we didn't do the like a VR or something, but then we had more like a video mobile setup and let them see what is happening in the floor. They themselves then came back and tell us like, oh, okay, now I understand what it means. So it's really giving that experience matters.
Yes. I fully agree, and definitely there's a problem. As you rightly mentioned, most of the agents or the entry-level executives start working and they don't have the exposure to the company's product or services, what is being delivered. And definitely the technology should be in position to help them, because not everybody will have the luxury to do the plant visit. The plants might not be in the city, might not be in the country at all, right? So definitely the technology should step in, and most of the GCCs should utilize this to have the value addition coming from the teams they are looking forward to. So now, looking from the these agents or the entry-level executives or the team leads perspective, right? Who is the primarily also going to be the audience viewers of this session? So from their perspective, if they are coming, organizations setting shop in India or maybe some other parts of the world where there's a cost efficiency available. So there's always complaint that the IT stack is not fully matured and we want something else, something more, and the transactions are broken and all that stuff, right? So people keep on struggling, and the process is complex, the process is too much manual, right? So now for a GCC which is just starting or have spent maybe 5 years, a decade into it and want to mature up. So how that journey should look like, maybe for the entry-level executive or team lead, as manager or the managers above?
Well, I think in my view, it's as an executive or as you come into it, right? There's two main things that I always tell them, right? Don't expect, that when in an actual floor, there are different teams, there are different processes. There's always going to be 80-20 rule at the best. You're not going to have 100% standard processes. So I would say that be open-minded and be curious about what you're doing and really get into the data, because I'm a big believer of telling a story through data. Because you see, when you're talking to experienced people and you want to learn from them, if they are not like structured, it's very difficult for them to bring you up to speed, because it's basically what you ask, then they will answer your question, right? So they expect that you know what to ask, but as a starter, you're also new, right? You also don't know what you need to ask. So, but then you are doing certain part of the transaction, and that's your role, right? Try to understand what is the input for it and what's the output for it. That's a good starting point, right? And then trying to kind of expand it further. Now, I also will say that don't afraid to put your proposal in front of them, and that will get your foot in the door in terms of you being seen as a partner rather than you're that extended arms for transaction, right? So yeah, be proactive with that, right? And that's, as a managers, I think you should do that. You should drive the value conversation with your partners on the other side, right? As long as you do some of these right. I have seen cases where, the team was treated as just as like their team, right? Because every manager on the other side is also experienced to handle the global team, right? So just because GCC, that's not going to be different as long as we show the willingness to, how do I say, help them, right? And once they see that attitude or the willingness, I believe you'll be with them and you'll drive the conversation together. But it's just don't wait for them to tell you, because sometimes the expectations are not spoken. So they think that this team is doing it, but they don't come back with the answer. And then the side, the other side of your business partners are not asking you that question. And that is a common complaint that I always heard here from GCC, right? if you can resonate with that in the past experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then encourage your team to go into virtuals or day in a live. How do you observe the other activities? And I think one advantage the GCC teams have generally, I'm not saying 100%, but generally, you tend to have most of the process consolidated in one place, which even your business partners won't have that opportunity if you think about it, right? Maybe certain locations are just for sales. There are certain locations just for factory. But again, at the GCC, you pretty much have every group represented. So I would say the GCC will have a bigger opportunity to really contribute to the whole thing versus some of the sites.
Because of centralization, and they are in the best position to really consolidate and bring a lot of work, a lot of stuff with
Right.
them.
I think that is where the middle layers or middle managers in GCC really matters. I mean, that really breaks or, makes the organization actually.
Great. So, now let's maybe touch upon the change culture and the stakeholder management, because that is, although you have touched upon in the previous sessions upon, but I believe this is one of the important aspects of digitalization, the software part of it, which should be looked at. So, how does change management should be looked at for the different people who are engaged in the digitalization journey? Multiple offices, multinational organization spread across multiple plants, services.
Well, that's a very difficult question, right? Because there's no single bullet which is going to solve every stakeholder attitude. Even yesterday, I had some issues which I have to deal with, right? But when it comes to the digitalization, right, the invariably one of the starting point for the resistance is losing your job, right? Whichever way that you do, whether it is like any kind of digitalization, right? Even simple as your ERP migrations or from your traditional ones. And I mean, clubbed with the fear of whether the new way of working is going to add value or not until people get used to it. But I think whenever we talk about digitalization, the key is really about how we make it known, or like how do we communicate in terms of how this is going to augment the work, not replace the work. I mean, rest is assured, there are certain automations which definitely will result in some manpower reduction. But I wouldn't say that all are going to be the way now in my organization that we do is we call it as a capacity creation. Now, whether you use it for something else or like progress of people into a different place is the management decision of that team who's benefiting from it. But I mean, I think, and also in your change management, you need a plan to do it from both bottom up and the top down. Because just one way is not going to give you the good results. Of course, there might be certain things like compliance, security, and those stuff. Probably it has to be a top down because there is no other, no other thing. So I would say that there are, I mean, in my view, I always go in with the assumption that they are right or they have, I mean, we are missing something from their point of view. Understand it first, listen first, and really put your strategy around like how you are going to address some of the challenges that they're bringing to the table. And when it comes to the top level, my preferred way is bring them along with you. So even before we present it in a broader forum, whoever going to be the ones who's going to get impacted or benefit, you have that one-on-one and make them as your LA. That's the best, right? But at the bottom up level, it's always going to be 50-50 or like, I'm not saying 50-50, but there's always going to be people who's not going to be happy with the change. But again, how do you use, but one thing that I realize is that in every organization, you have a catalyst, right? Whichever level it is, it doesn't matter whether they are manager, whether they are director, or they are operator, or whether they are just a simple buyer or whatever, right? Whatever level it is, identify them and use them as your extended team to really promote what you're trying to do. That works best at the bottom level, right? At the working level. Because if they are the one who's using it and it's the day to day and their co-workers or colleagues are doing the similar job, they see the benefits, right? Then they actually embrace us better than you go on selling the benefits of it. Actually, I find the middle managers are the difficult part. right? Because maybe they are stuck between both top and
Both
bottom.
of us, yeah.
Right. And that is where I normally constantly engage. I mean, that will be the more frequent engagement that you have to do. I mean, unless you, if none of these works, normally what I'll do is people who are resisting so much, we will basically give them the responsibility of doing it.
Bell the cat.
Yeah. So that's the part, right? And yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, there's nothing like one silver bullet which is going to solve everything. But it's really, you need to be open, right? And I have been with a company where, because it's like in the past, it's all customer driven. So some of the change management could be very straightforward, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody wants to make the customer happy and end customer happy. I tend to agree, right? I mean, if it is a customer driven, you tend to have a better reception on the change side of it versus the internal process efficiency driven, right?
Yeah.
Because that's when you're and I think one last thing I would say, which is important one, is make sure your KPIs are aligned. If there are multiple functional teams involved, you can't be just improving one KPI at the expense of others. Those scenarios, you will have a very hard resistance, at least in one side of it, right? So make sure that when you're defining your charter and everything else, your total KPI is aligned so that everybody has the same common goal, right? So that is, to me, is critical, because if that is not aligned, cross-functional projects are always going to be a challenge.
I fully agree. Veena, from my experience, which I had lately, one of the team members came and said, okay, we have created a Gen AI tool which can fish out and look up all the process documents and can give the information. And then he was reaching out to everyone and telling them to start using it. I said, boss, it will not happen that way, that you just send a mail and people will start using it. You'll have to get embedded into their workflows
Exactly.
and then make it important and see the value addition they are getting and show them the use cases, show them the proof of concept, how it is working. Then only they will be able to utilize the technology. Otherwise, it will have the initial euphoria and you will be also monitoring it intentfully. But after 3 months, 6 months, it will die down.
I agree with you. I mean, any of the digital work has to be embedded within the process. If it is a standalone, I agree with you. Especially in this AI world, I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, because people are accustomed or habitual of using everything in their own particular way. The change management doesn't really easily happens for them.
But I also feel that there is a demographic focus that you have to give, right? I now recruit all these new hires to go and promote the, advantage with your experienced people, actually. That works. I mean, these guys are very savvy and and they're very open to do a adoption of the digital stuff. And they feel proud saying that, oh, at my work, I'm doing it versus I'm still doing my Excel, So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think your workflow point is spot on. Yeah.
And also, what I request the managers to bring up, as you rightly mentioned, we have the tech-savvy young generation, to bring up that the youngest person in the team and talk about the latest changes which he or she has adopted in his life, because they are the person who are quick to understand and do all the creative work with it, as compared to rest one of the people. So they become the examples, the good examples how to take on the change management.
And they also feel very proud when they do a change within the organization, right? And I have seen them well committed, persistent in chasing and talking to people, follow up. They're amazing, actually. Yeah.
Sure. And now coming up on the future of work, technology and tools, Veena. So we have talked a lot about Gen AI, agentic AI in the previous sessions. Definitely, the more we talk about it, becomes less. It is a very vast topic to discuss. But then there we have other technologies as well. We have the blockchains, we have the quantum computing coming up, we have IoT, we have digital twins. So maybe let's spend a few minutes discussing about each one of these. And if you know any, you can talk about any use cases, blockchain, digital twins, how that effectively are being used across industries, or how they will be able to bring the changes as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, probably, well, not fully exposed to all the technology that you mentioned, particularly quantum. We spoke about it internally, and when I put my technology roadmap, the question is there a space for quantum in a supply chain?
It is too far off and too looks like too gimmick as of now.
Yeah, that plus as of use cases which require such a big processing, I don't know, maybe in your automotive and some other place, maybe you might have much bigger use cases where your data is huge and need a real time, decisions, if because it's life or death at the real time, right? So and medicals and those stuff. But when it comes to factory and size of the company,
maybe the supply chain, the supportive functions, it may not be immediately be effective to utilize.
Correct. So because the investment is high, and is there a ROI for that investment, right? So at the moment, I would say as of today, I'm not really looking at that for the next year and a half or two for that matter. Probably things will change. We don't know, but at this point where we are, right? Now, IoT is all about your smart manufacturing, touchless manufacturing, and what you do within the four walls and how you use those data. Because IoT is definitely needed because your factory environment requires faster turnaround. You have a lot of data which cannot go back and forth between the network, and you really need that edge side IoT solutions. We are using IoTs primarily in warehouses and also factories, particularly when you talk about monitoring your factory processes or really looking at your factory. I mean, looking at each of the stations, the test results, how is it going, and also even like if you are using like a Kanban way to refresh your lines and things like that, how do we identify when it goes down on certain inventory levels? How do we automatically replenish it, blah, 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 right? And how do we start sending signals between the factory lines to the warehouses to rearrange easy pickup or fast pickup to the line, kit to line, so we can stack the warehouses according to your potential build plan that's going to look like for the next week or two, because anyway you're going to have a warehouse which is replenishing that into combine area or the store area where it feeds the line for 3 days worth of inventory and things like that. Yeah, IoT is playing a big plan, big way there, right? We also have a lot of robotic assemblies, where a few manufacturing processes with the robotics and that becoming big there as well, right? And I think in our previous company we have completely operatorless lines, right? So yeah, IoTs are there for sure. Now, blockchain, in my view, it's still maturing. We do have cases because in your entire supply chain network, who are all your partners are, everybody have to be matured to really connect the whole end to end. We are actually looking at few pieces of blockchain, like maybe a pockets, like for example, when suppliers are shipping certain parts and all the way, because the suppliers also need to know like which server or which product the part is going in. And then sometimes depending on your payment terms and even with your SOI, there are different ways of invoicing, right? Either you do it at the time when you're shipping it to the customer, or at the time you're giving it to the line, or at the time you're picking from the warehouse. It could be, however good your negotiations are. So how do we start sharing these signals? So you don't talk about transactional EDIs back and forth, rather use the blockchain to share the data. And then at the end of the day, you just do your financial transactions, right? So there are pockets of it, I would say, but then the complex your network is, it's difficult to keep the end to end as a blockchain because everybody in the node has to be capable of doing it. But we are seeing benefits, obviously, in certain spaces, because we don't have to worry about all this, drop of data in between through EDIs, APIs, whatever. I think in the old days, even now, people are like, even your PO reconciliation that people do every week. If you have a good partner with the blockchains, then you don't have to worry about all this reconciliation stuff. So we do have the thing, right? Now, when it comes to the digital twin, I think that's where there are, like I think we touched upon a little bit in the previous conversation, and I see that the data digital twin is also going to play a big role in supply chain. And I think still it'll evolve because very simple example, right? If there is a delay in a port and your parts expected to be delivered, whatever, let's say today, and you know that it's not going to dock in today, it's going to take 2 days or 3 days, how do we automatically reshuffle the lines and really reschedule it, right? We can do that with digital twin today, right? If you don't have each of these processes and the data modeled into the digital twin, you need planners to track it, and they basically have to understand it, and then they have to figure it out, how do they reshuffle it, right? So that's on the side of it. Now on the physical digital twin side of it, particularly it's useful when you're trying to build a new factory, or like even you're trying to simulate a new line setup for a new product, and you want to reorganize the way how it's a one flow manufacturing process, or it's going to be, you're dividing that into multiple. Do you want to do one big work order, or you want to like chop it and then do it in 2 or 3, depending on whichever business model that you want to get to, right? Whether you want to do flexible, meaning you want to up to certain level of build to give a capacity for a faster turnaround to the customer orders. Maybe you build up to PCBA or SMT and stock it. In that sense, you can't do an entire work order. So maybe you want to split it. So some of these, like organizing the production process and then really setting up the line to make sure effective or faster production cycle time, efficient production cycle time. I think those spaces where we have seen it's being used, and it's really helpful. But I have also heard some of the high design oriented companies are trying to do a digital twin from a design perspective also, right? Which personally I don't have experience to, but I have heard from the people, right? So when you talk about digital twin, first of all, be clear on what you want to attack, right? Whether it's data, whether it's process, whether it is physical, whether it's simulations, what exactly that we are trying to do. And as long as your objectives are cleared, I mean, it's pretty useful, I would say. Yeah.
Specifically on the blockchain, Veena probably will also touch upon when we talk about ESG in coming section. So I believe blockchain will be able to help a bit in a better way how to control the ethical sourcing and all other aspects which falls under ESG. We'll talk about a bit later then. Underrated tool or productivity hack specifically from the women or the diversity point of view. We are also going to talk about the inclusion very soon. And now since we are talking about the different tools and technology, I thought that, okay, let me touch upon right away. I know the tools are not gender specific or the diversity point of view, but what do you think? Any productivity hack, any digital tool which will help our women folks from the work-life balance, or anybody else from that perspective?
Well, I think from a work-life balance, it does help. I mean, for me, personally, right? Because being in the AI lead role, I need to catch up with what's happening in the industry, right? Now, I mean, of course, I don't have the time to sit down and read every announcements which is coming every day. So normally what I do is, it's a weekend job for me for an hour or two. I'll just go and do like summarization, right? Whether you use GPT or Llama, it doesn't matter. Just give a key industry change on certain space. I can be, then I pick like which one that I want to go into the details and then really get into it, right? And, the other thing I would say is, even like in the past, whenever, I mean, I think COVID also made the difference, but today people are open to have virtual brainstorming sessions or whatever, because in the past, everything is travel. So being a woman, taking care of the family and everything else, I mean, being away roughly about 60% is not going to work either, right? And today we were able to do very effective even without being physically there. And so I think that's again an advantage. I mean, I think when it comes to, I mean, I would say that take an advantage of some of this. And it's not that anybody else is going to tell you how to use it and in a way how you improve your life. but you need to be putting that effort to go and do it. I mean, in fact, yesterday I was talking, and people are now talking about, I was talking to my son, and he was saying that, well, everybody in the company has, he's in the workforce now. Just joined, right? And he's saying that everybody has access to GPT, Copilot, everything. And I'm like, okay, so, but then how they're using it, because GPT as a buyer, right? As a personal, probably you will use it for like your planning, your whatnot, right? But again, how people use this, right? On a day-to-day as a buyer, because that's the question I always get asked. You guys are saying that I'm not using it, but I don't know how to use it.
Exactly.
Right? So actually, I was using technology. I was using a GPT yesterday, trying to figure it out as a buyer. What are all the typical use cases and what are all the benchmarks? There are some nice stuff. Now we need to package it and go and train the other people. But the other thing I would say that, at least for me, I use some of these recent LLMs, right, as one of my critical conversation coach, because we tend to not to have a hard stand with the fear of people seeing you as, very rude, arrogant, because that's difference, right? When a guy says something and the women say something, the perceptions is always still there, however hard that you break. So I try to use the thing, LLMs to have like kind of a simulated conversations and really see like what is the best way to approach it. But at the same time, I also feel that we have to make sure that, we don't use it like whatever it says, you just say or you just do it, right? Because one thing that I personally feel is that you have to give a personal touch to some of these technology outcomes. Because, frankly, I was trying to use a Copilot to draft the messages and stuff like that, but I stopped using it, right? Because the tone of the message is monotonous.
Yes, it's a machine.
It's not my thing. But getting back to the thing, right? Try to use, let's say, for example, in your manager circle, you don't have equivalent partner who you can bounce ideas and you don't feel comfortable with your colleague, male colleague or whatever, then use some of these tools to kind of help you to the coach, right? I'm not saying that that's the only way, but that's one way of getting it done. And also, like I said, now I'm using it to get it updated, which traditionally we are running. I have been mentoring few women in tech, ladies, young career, because unfortunately today, I would say that it is still where, I think Singapore is not that bad, but it's still bad compared to rest of the industry. Like technology industry is still like women's are less represented. But if you talk about India, it's very, very bad, actually.
Extremely low.
Extremely poor, especially after your like manager level. It's very poor, very poor. Like, I think last week we were reviewing it. It's something, even in my previous roles also, right? It's somewhere like early 20s or at the best, maybe the late 20s, right? But in the colleges, it's a completely different proposition. So one of the common, during these mentor sessions, what I realize is that really about time. People are, especially once you start your family, it's about time, right? So I would say that start organizing your time through some of these technology, right?
Yes.
Which will help you prioritizing. Because look, I am using my Copilot to do the prioritization of the open task, right? And focus on the priority. You're not able to solve everything. You're not able to solve the world hunger, right? But so how do we use some of this to help you, right? Offload some of the work that you have to do physically, or like, so you have to spend a lot of time to do so, right? And I definitely see that, some of these tools are helping. And personal coaching support, it's also there, right? But I'm not saying that technology is only your coach. Go and look for your mentors and grow your mentors or the sponsors. But the time is the key when it comes to the men, right? And I think in this world, at this time, I would say that technology is very demanding. I was joking with my husband because he's retired now, and he's only Oracle and SAP. He's done with the entire career. And today, every day you talk about something else, right? Yesterday MCP, today something else. You have to know. Yesterday prompt engineering, today context engineering.
Yes,
Right? So
it is changing too rapidly.
yeah, but yeah, but how do we get using some of these to like kind of accelerate your learning or accelerate your catch up? Yeah, and even you do your benchmarking online, right? We can do that today. Yeah.
Yes. So, Veena, you just mentioned that you are mentoring the women on in the technology front, and let's talk about a bit more. You also written an article about how to empower the women, and that was really good. So, how do you see the organization can help women to come back from the mid-career drops, right? Specifically in India, you touched upon it is extremely low. And in India, it is also because of the cultural thing, right? So middle class families or lower middle class families, they just started maybe a few decades sending the girl child to school and colleges. They are coming out. But if you go to the smaller towns and cities, there are still the cultural legacy, which is still there in the ecosystem. Okay, you're getting married, you have the kids, you have household work to do and all that stuff. And that's how, and even in cities, we don't see the support system for female folks, right? Because they have to do a really great activities at home to take care of the entire family, even when she's working, and then take care of the entire job. And in between commuting in Indian cities, unfortunately become more boring, right? So that leads to the dropouts at some point of time. Too much stress in the offices and too much again taking care of the entire family stuff on single-handedly. Any sort of thoughts which you have how to bring that kind of, because in my view personally, I believe that if we are able to tackle this problem in India, specifically starting from the major cities, we will see start traction in bringing up women back into the employment fold for sure.
Yeah, actually, it's a very how do I say? I think it requires a lot of support across different space, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
I think first of all, the important support has to come from your immediate managers, our managerial level, right? How do we there are a couple of things that we are talking about here. Like for those people who's continue to be in the workforce, how do we keep them there, right?
Yeah,
And not losing them
yeah,
is one element, right? Now, as a managers, what we can provide as a support. Now, what I mean by that is, how many of us are okay with the flexibility that they need? Now,
yeah,
I think 5 years before, when people talk about working from home, it's like, it's like almost people disappear and they don't really contribute and all of that. And I think COVID changed it. Now, obviously, now there is a trend to bring back everybody into office, right? Whether it is 2 days, whether it's 5 days, it depends on the
yeah,
individual companies. But cities like Chennai and Bangalore, commute is like, I think yesterday was my team was saying like, hey Veena, it took one way 4 hours. I'm like,
yeah,
okay. I mean, if the man on the road for 4 hours one way, and
yeah,
it's not going to work, right?
yeah, yeah,
It's really
absolutely.
not going to work. But we have to create an environment where it is trustable between the employees and the managers. When they need, they do it, meaning when they need, they stay home and do the work and they contribute, then they deliver, and that should be still fine. And when it is needed to be face to face, and the employees has to be a little bit more flexible enough to take an adjustment, right? At that time, I would also say that, I mean, what I telling my team, I mean, whoever I'm mentoring, is be vocal about your support.
Yeah,
Don't suffer in silence, right? And saying
absolutely.
that, oh, everything I need to do, because that's a women tendency,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I went through this, and like, when I was early days of working, and
Mm,
when my son was searching for my helper versus,
mm,
he's with me, and then, but he still want to look for her, it
yeah,
pains, right? But I think it's just a matter of that 2 3 years,
yeah,
and later it's about how you provide the quality time versus the number of hours that you spend with them. And what I tell the people that I coach or mentor is, people say you balance, you juggle, and all of
mm.
that, right? In my view, some of the balls has to be dropped. And
Eventually,
you
truth. Yeah,
can't
yeah.
juggle everything.
Everything. Yeah, true.
So you need to decide what you need to drop.
What is the important ball at
Yeah,
that moment? What are
yeah.
the red
And
balls for that matter?
and when you drop, don't worry about it,
Yeah,
right? Don't keep thinking that you don't feel guilty about it. Let me put it that way. That's the right
yeah,
word, right? And work around that, right? And that's what I tell them. And then of course, the one thing that I tell them is you ask, because like you said, the social setting in India, if you are in a joint family, if you're like, how many of you has the flexibility of bringing your husband to go and work with you in the kitchen? But you ask for it, right? And I think, like I said, I have a high regards for the younger generation. So if you ask, I think you be open about it, you be transparent about it, you talk about it, right? Don't suffer in silence like your older generations are, and it will help. Not just in with at home, even in the office. No matter whether your boss is a woman or male or female, right? Have the conversation. And I think that is one thing I learned after I moved out of India, because when I was there, I'm an elder child for the family. I was told what to do, right? So I always look for an instruction, but that doesn't work, right? So when you move out, then you start to learn that, okay, so you have to ask what you need. And when you ask, if you get it, it's good. If you don't get it, you're not losing anything, right? So I think that's what I tell them, right? Be open about it, have the conversation and talk about it, and not afraid to take the opportunity. Because if you think too much and say, this project, yeah, it is important, I love to do it, but one of the other thing that I see people leave is because they hesitate to take the opportunity and they let it go, and their colleague picks it up and they shine it in that. And we feel like, oh, I'm not good enough, right? So maybe with all the pressure, maybe I'm good enough at home versus I continue to fight this battle, right? But I feel that once you pick up, even if you have a little bit of doubt, I believe if it's something that you want to do, once you take it, you will figure out how to balance it. Once you are in it, you will figure it out. I mean, that happens to me as well, right? So don't, if there are certain things which you want to do it, don't afraid to pick up the opportunity. Now, the next question that you had was, if they left the workforce and they want to come back, what do we do, right? I think there is two things, right? When we are getting back into the work, what I tell them is ready to accept that you're going to start in a different level than when you left, or different level compared to your cohort, right? Or like your colleagues, whatever you talk about, right? That's bound to happen because they were in the workforce through that, and some of them would have done
Might have
good progress. So we need to have that mental support to these people and say it's okay, right? Because that's a choice you made, and now you're coming back. Maybe you can accelerate your journey if you put your whole thing, right? But so that's a mindset preparation that we have to do. Then we look at when they left, where they were versus where is the organization when it comes to the technology maturity. What is the gap in terms of technology skill sets, and work out a plan with them in terms of the training, bringing up to speed, and how do we inject them back into the projects, and how do we scale them up, right? And what I do in those scenarios also, like, have a more closer connects to see how do they progress and what other support that is needed. So we need to create that support network within the organization to get them back into the workforce, I would say. Yeah.
That's very important. And thank you, Vinam. This session has been quite great, and we have almost completed 60 minutes. And I believe you have a hard cut now.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll continue our conversation. Very soon we'll have the next session with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinam. Have a good day.
Same to you. Bye.